Hey everyone, welcome. I am Jason Morgan, editor of AAPEX Live, and welcome to the AAPEX Live Aftershow. Today we're talking with Amy Antenora, the editor of AMN and overall aftermarket guru. Amy, thank you for joining me.
Well, thank you. What a nice introduction.
Well, happy
Welcome
to
back.
have you. Yeah, well, we connected here at the show. You walked me around, did a guided tour, and I'm excited to pick your brain on what I saw and interpret this all for me of what it means for the aftermarket.
Absolutely. I think there's a lot of exciting stuff to talk about, and I appreciate you bringing me on the show floor.
Yeah. All right, so let's just start there. What are you excited about? What kind of caught your attention as you saw the releases coming out and took a virtual walk around the floor?
Yeah. Well, I think in general, I think there's just a sense of robustness in the aftermarket that we should all be really excited about. Tons of new product introductions, which is not a surprise. That's what everyone goes to AAPEX for, to release and talk about their new products. But given the fact that we're coming out of a pandemic, we're still seeing global supply chain struggles. I think that's really a great sign for the health of the aftermarket, that we're seeing so many new part numbers, innovations being on display this year.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's a really good point, too, because you think about the trouble getting raw materials or even just getting parts over to where they need to be, right?
Exactly.
You would think that maybe that's a sign that the aftermarket's pretty bullish on next year being able to get the products, especially new products, right? You want to put your best foot forward and those come out, get those to where they need to be.
Absolutely. And I also think it speaks to the business strategy of the suppliers. You know, they had that pandemic to sort of plan ahead, plan for inventory, and I think they handled it really well, and now they're in a strong spot as a result.
Right. Well, and new products, and we saw some diversification into new segments from people too, right? We have all those posts on the AAPEX blog. We will post the link below. Okay, and one of the things I think that stood out to me too is, kind of on that diversification kind of theme, is just the amount of innovation, right? I think I mentioned it when we did the walk around video, but I was just taken by surprise of how many EVs were on the floor, right? How much technology is really infused in the industry. As kind of a newcomer for me, at least on the automotive side, is this, did you find this surprising? Is this atypical of the aftermarket? You kind of think aftermarket, maybe they kind of have an established thing and maybe this can seem as a threat, but I really did feel like everyone was looking at this as an opportunity. Is this a sea change we're witnessing right now?
A little bit. I think that's a great way of putting it. I mean, you did mention the aftermarket is a long-time traditional business that's been based in, these are the distribution steps that we take. This is how we do things.
Right.
And it's been a very stable industry for a really long time. Right. But I do think that we are seeing some really interesting changes, a lot of it coming out of these larger corporations, a lot of the German companies, Continental as an example, where they've been around forever. They maybe have OE heritage that they're playing off of, and they also are starting to dip their toes in some of these new technologies. So I think they're playing in both fields, really, which is a smart strategy. They're, especially in Europe, they're a little bit ahead of us in terms of emissions regulations and expectations for what vehicles are going to look like on the roads in the next few years. I mean, I just think that there's a lot that we're seeing internationally that's now coming into the North American market.
Yeah, more globalization, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, that's a good point. We're seeing that kind of across the boards in light duty and heavy duty and automotive, right? The scale that globalization gives you. If you invest in one thing over here, chances are you're going to try to put it over here because you've made the investment. You want to bring it over. I really liked what you said about the established distribution and how we do things, because I think the power of the aftermarket is the amazing ability to get the part you need to the place you need it, right? When you need it, right? This is an amazing machine that churns.
It is.
That should remain the same even as something like EVs come into the market, right? Now we think about electric vehicles and there's a lot of changing components.
Yeah.
But I did feel like there are opportunities there from the aftermarket. Anything you saw from the show or anything you're talking about with people and how they're receiving EVs and how they're starting to accept that and look for opportunities versus the challenges?
Yeah, I mean, I think initially there was a little bit of discomfort with all of the talk about EVs exploding on U.S. roads, just because this industry has been so based in internal combustion engines, and what was that going to mean for these companies that are so heavily invested in that. But like you mentioned, sea change, I think we're seeing where a lot of these companies realize they can play in both fields, and it's probably a really smart strategy. I mean, I think I wrote down here, let me see what the number was. Lang Research, which is a well-established aftermarket research firm, they said by 2030, we're going to see 36 million ICE vehicles on U.S. roads. Right. And so EVs are going to maybe make up 5 to 8% of vehicles on the road. It's going to be 95% ICE vehicles going forward. Right. So I don't think there's anything to worry about, but at the same time, consumer and voter changes are on the wind. You know, we've got an economic recession that's constantly being talked about. We have high gas prices, we have environmental issues, and people vote with their wallets today. So I think we will start to incrementally see more EVs on the road because of that. Right. And I do think that the suppliers that are starting to play in both fields are going to be really successful going forward. And I think we saw a lot of that at AAPEX, where a lot of people were introducing new EV product lines, even chemicals. Right.
Yeah. I mean, you know, battery management systems, thermal management systems for batteries. Going back to piggyback on something you said, even at the AAPEX keynote breakfast, Bill Hanvey, Paul McCarthy mentioned that they still see a long tail for ICE vehicles too, just supporting your claim there. They're looking at 2040 still being a majority, which is true, right? I mean, if you look at kind of the timelines for some of the automakers, their timelines are to have an all-electric offering by 2035, 2040, those kind of things, which means that is what you can buy. It's not what's on the road. My car is still 12 years old, and I still depend on the aftermarket to keep me rolling, right? I'm going to drive that thing into the ground.
The aftermarket loves you.
That's right. Very cool. So yeah, a lot of great action there. Both the associations put out a new confidence report on EVs, marking the opportunities too, that we'll be sure to share a link for as well. Yeah. Right to repair.
Right to repair.
Right to repair. So we've seen some movement in Massachusetts, a good step forward.
Yes.
But I do have to say, I think one of the things that was talked about at the show, maybe a little more obliquely or around the fact, is the role of data security in right to repair, and how data security could potentially be kind of like a gatekeeping from the OEs, right? Like you have to be able to integrate data, receive information. That's what right to repair is all about. And now there's this new technology hitch. What are you seeing at the industry at large with that narrative? Is that something that's catching on? Are people understanding the importance here?
Absolutely. As you mentioned, Massachusetts is sort of the benchmark by which the rest of the country is keeping an eye on legislatively. The voters there voted by an overwhelming majority that they wanted independent repair facilities to have the ability to repair their vehicles. They want to be able to choose where they take their vehicles. Right. The OEs are basically, like you said, use the word gatekeeping, which is perfect. They are using cybersecurity as the scare tactic, basically, to try and withhold more repair information. And, you know, as a motorist, you could kind of understand that, but at the same time, you don't want the automakers owning your data either. You want to own that data. Yeah. I mean, that's your vehicle. You're getting in that every day. You're paying for that. Why should you hand that information over to anybody else? Right. From the aftermarket perspective, that's severely limiting the ability of independent repair facilities to be able to do their jobs.
Right. But the ability, it speaks more to, and I think this is what I think an education opportunity and something that people were talking about is, what does that mean? How do I share it with my shop, right? If I pull into the shop I like to go to, it's an independent shop, it's just down the road from me. If now my car is now something that's electronically controlled, that's how I interface with all the information, I have to be able to send them that information, and they have to be able to receive it and understand it, right? Just in the way we're plugging shop tools in now, you got to be able to do that on a telematics and data standard as well.
Right. Well, you know, if you're anybody that owns a newer vehicle or leases like I do, you will see how the automakers are trying to take possession of that data. Okay. They will send you reminders. I, in fact, just got a text reminder that my vehicle, based on the data it was able to pull, is ready for a certain service. Okay. The only way they got that is through tapping into that telematics data. Now, why couldn't my repair shop in my hometown that I visit regularly tap into that same the same
information,
accessibility, basically. They should be able to do that.
Right.
And that's, a shortcoming that the automakers are tapping into. They're trying to lock them out.
Right. Well, and and to your point, you should be able to put that in the hands of your shop, right? And
right.
We all know that, data integration, people talk about it in very vague terms, and it's easy, but it is not easy, and it takes a long time. So even if one automaker gets their data into one solution or maybe aftermarket app, it has to be made available across the board freely, right? And it takes time, and it takes, to your point, advocacy. Right, advocacy from the aftermarket, advocacy from the consumer, and to let, especially regulation and legislation, people know that this is happening, and we want our data, we want it now, and we want to be able to share it. I might not know what it means, right? But that reminder, right?
Yeah.
Then do you call your shop? They're like, are you using the OEM stuff where you get the reminder, like, okay, well, I'm just going to go take it over to my guy then in the aftermarket. Do they try to funnel you to the dealer then?
Yeah, well, I actually had, speaking, from a personal perspective, when I renewed a lease on a new vehicle this past year, I had a little notification that came up on the computer as I was working with the gentleman signing the papers that said certain telematics data is not available in Massachusetts. And I was like, Massachusetts, I know why that's happening.
That's right. Were you like, excuse me, sir, do you know who you're talking
I
with
actually
here?
had to explain to the financial person in the dealership office why that was happening. And he had no idea, and he works for an automaker.
Right. No, they wouldn't know.
Right.
They wouldn't know, right? So advocacy for sure. And then being able to tell that story. Amy, I appreciate you joining me today.
Yeah, it was
and
a pleasure.
Telling all sorts of stories. I learned a lot, and I hope I'll talk to you again soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks, everyone.